So that was the first level. I guess I gotta be careful about hitting this. First level of Sonic, we did it. We all completed a level of Sonic Mania.
You could say that.
Let me show you.
Some of us completed it more than others.
What the times were,
Don't say
and then
it.
we'll talk about this first before we talk about level design in Green Hill Zone. So for Green Hill Zone, Victoria, you started us with a blistering pace of 3 minutes and 53 seconds.
I sure did.
Very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
It was just amazing to watch it when I was looking through the footage. Cool. I put down a time of 12 minutes and 26 seconds after a couple game overs and game crashings.
26 or 21?
21.
12:21. Oh, it's a palindrome.
Mm-hmm.
Austin killed it out there.
I did pretty good.
Fresh, looking out the box. Your playthrough actually looked really good. 7:36.
I kind of lost the feeling on how to do the dash out of the air. I had it at first, you saw, and I was really blazing, and then I kind of lost it.
Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to pull off reliably.
And then QB, you got a time of 17 minutes and 7 seconds.
So you're saying that I played the game the most?
You played it more than anyone. You are the most efficient at continuing to play Sonic.
The most to say.
You have the most experience.
You have the most to say.
Out of anyone, really, we're the ones holding this conversation down because we've gotten to see Green Hill Zone many, many times in the last hour. Multiple times. I've been all over that zone. Now, these are the times with the game overs and everything. I did actually calculate yours and my time. Basically, the fastest run from start of Act 1 to finish was 7 minutes. Oh. Very, very nice. And then mine was 4 minutes. So it was not as fast as you.
But you have played the game before as well.
I've played that level before. And after playing it 3 times in a row on the game overs and the crashes, the last time I played through it, Act 1 to finish, was about a little over 4 minutes. So no, we're there. We're there. It actually, but game overs aside, we were in a very good place. Now, we're not here to talk about the times, necessarily. We're here to talk literally about...
But the prize the times are connected to the prize.
That's right. There was a trophy.
QB.
I was promised a trophy.
Yes, QV, you will have a trophy in your honor. It'll be a Fox trophy.
Do I get a participation trophy?
You'll get a nice little touch on the nipple.
That was not my nipple.
For participating.
He tried.
We'll have We'll have a big party at the end of it all.
Oh, good.
We'll have a big Sonic Maniac party. Green Hill Zone. Green Hill Zone. 2 acts of it. Act 1, Act 2. What did you guys think of Green Hill Zone?
Green Hill Zone Act 1 felt very, very familiar. I honestly can't say with total certainty whether it's any different at all. But I haven't played Sonic 1 in a long time. Act 2 was obviously completely different. And it was just like, hey guys, mechanics! And it's like, okay.
It's time to put in the work.
There was a boss at the end of Act 1 and Act 2, and they were both hard, and it was like, dang. Well, this game immediately throws you into, high difficulty versions of... Not high difficulty versions necessarily, but higher difficulty versions, much denser versions.
I want to talk about the bosses in a little bit, because I think they're really interesting for this. What were your initial thoughts on Green Hill Zone?
Initial thoughts was that it was not green at all.
Not green.
It was blue and white.
It was blue and... Oh, because you're Tails.
Yeah.
You were Tails the whole time, so your perspective is airborne.
Actually, the interesting thing about Tails is that he does get tired after a while.
Right.
So he does have to hit the ground every so often.
Were there bad guys in the ground?
Sometimes, so
you gotta get out of
left.
there.
Yeah.
Gotta get back to that sky.
Yeah.
Beautiful blue
so
skies.
Immediately do whatever it is to get back and then just fly all the way.
How about you, Victoria? What were your initial thoughts on Green Hill Zone?
So I've actually got a lot to talk about here.
Yep.
So, one of the smartest decisions a good Sonic game can do in order to teach the player about what is safe, what is not, is to figure out some way that they can either slow the player down, stop them, or at least, pause them for a brief period while showing them the area that's coming up next. In Green Hill Zone, they do that in a very literal sense with the very liberal placement of rocks in the stage. That's what Green Hill Zone does in order to stop the player, as opposed to, say, ramps and loop-de-loops in later levels. So, now, obviously, Green Hill Zone does have loop-de-loops, but the rock placement in the stage is meant to keep players who are constantly on the ground and don't really try and go to any higher or lower tiers to stop them occasionally and give them a sense to prepare for threats ahead. So, obviously, more skilled players will not have this problem. They'll be able to spin dash and immediately jump to gain height and just fly over those rocks because they already know what's coming up. So that's a very smart design decision that I've seen a lot in more recent 2D Sonic games.
I want to build off of that. Let's talk about mobility, especially in Green Hill Zone. We are moving left to right, trying to go from the bottom to the top. That was kind of the general energy of Green Hill Zone, was that they want you to go kind of in this diagonal trajectory. You try to get high so you can go down hills and stuff. And so you're trying to do your best to move it. I saw it during your playthrough. There was a section where you were there were blocks that were pulsing in and out, and you were struggling to try to jump up them. And then when you got up them, it was a big ramp, and you just went for it. Were there any points in your guys' playthrough where you were stopped or moved in a way that you were satisfied or dissatisfied with?
There was one problem with Green Hill Zone that I noticed. There was a tube that I needed to go down actually to progress through the level. And you probably saw this if you watched the whole thing closely. There was a tube I went down, and it actually pushed me back out. And I assumed, oh, so that tube would have been if I came from the other direction, it would have pushed me up here. So I figured that's where I needed to go. And I keep running into one of those springs that just pushes you in the other direction. And when that happens in the classic Green Hill Zone, like that's the original version of that trope in Sonic design. And that's the first instance of them teaching you, hey, every once in a while when you're spin dashing, jump, you know? And the fact that they subvert it here is actually really, really frustrating because that's the classic example. And if you were to leave any of them alone, that would be the one, you know? And so here they kind of subvert it and they make you go to the left to get where you need to go. And it's like, this needed to be signposted. This needs to be signposted a little better.
Sonic Mania actually seems to use moving back to the left a lot more than any other 2D Sonic.
And I appreciate the ambition of that. That's great. It's just they threw it at you really hard there by like completely subverting. And I mean, it sets a tone. I'll expect it more later, but it's also just like for that example there, it was a little frustrating. If only because if I had just touched the tube the first time and it had been more gated and coded to where, like, as soon as you touch it, you just get sucked in, and that would have made it a little better. That's because I literally got pushed out.
Especially in the first zone, like, you need to be absolutely clear when you want the player to do something that they're explicitly otherwise trained not to do.
Right.
Sonic,
like move to the left.
Sonic as a concept, as a game design set of principles, is move to the right and also up if you can.
Did you ever move to the left?
No.
I didn't think so.
Gosh, I wonder why.
Whenever there was like a giant wall or something, I'd be like, huh, I'd fly.
And you just go over it. Yeah.
That's it.
I got to climb up a bunch of walls. There was one point where I ended up having to go left, which pushed me up a tube upward to the left more. And I felt like I was going backwards, and then I went up and over and just left that whole area.
Yep. There's a
which
lot
is
of
weird. But it was cool that I had that freedom, that option to do that.
You can tell that this was made by people who didn't have a lot of restrictions placed on what they're supposed to make, because this is the kind of design that comes from people who know their game design, and they're just like, I'm going to show off. Because this is like, I mean, we're already in Green Hill Zone, and I mean, I kind of, as an adult, I kind of frown on it, but like, it's just,
this is not my Sonic.
It's skilled, but it's also very flashy for the sake of being flashy, and I hope that it pans out to being consistently good. Because if you do a lot of flashy game design with no real, like, thematic substance behind it or anything, and you do it over time, and then you get worse at it over time, and that's how you start getting stuff like Sonic CD late levels and stuff like that.
Let's talk about some of that thematic kind of breakdown.
Oh, wait, I have one more thing to mention about mobility. The point at which you can get the speed shoes in the first act of Green Hill Zone, I'm sure you saw that.
I had a couple of them. They felt good.
So, like, gosh, I wonder why I didn't see it. But
hang out on the ground. There's some toys down there with all the enemies and bombs.
Oh.
But the point at which you get the speed shoes is there's a section of ground that comes immediately after that that's clearly designed to be directly navigable with the speed shoes, but you just fall right through it if you're moving at normal speed. And like that really works because the speed shoes are still technically hidden, but the area in front of them is clearly designed for it. Like, the points in Sonic level designs in which you're given the speed shoes power-up, and which the area is built for that, feel the most satisfying because it feels like, A, you found a secret, and B, you're using it to the very best of your ability. Like in Mario, when you get a star and there's a line of Goombas right in front of you. What are the odds?
I haven't had that happen to me in any other Sonic game except this one.
Mm-hmm.
Every time in the older Sonic games, whenever I would get speed shoes, I would just thrash myself into enemies constantly.
Yeah.
It would just speed up my own futility of movement.
And
they
this were always like hidden in such a way that it's supposed to be for people who really, really know their way through the level.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a punishment almost.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go fast. I'm stuck going fast now for the next.
It's a tool. It's
20
not,
seconds.
It's
In this game, the moment I would get the speed shoes, I would just blast off, and I would hit a ramp that would take me to another ramp. That would take me to another ramp, and it was like
crash the game.
And then it would crash the game. Okay, it did crash the game. I did go so fast to crash the game. That was not on purpose. Yes, it felt so good. It made so much sense. Everything clicked for a moment, and there was a zen moment that happened.
That's how Sonic rewards players. That's how Sonic rewards players. It's been said to death, but
I like that you also brought up the stop part of that too.
The speed really is the reward. Solid momentum is the reward for good play in the Sonic game. And,
let's talk about Green Hill Zone in kind of a thematic sense. What kind of motifs did you see in Act 1, and how did those motifs progress in Act 2? You talked about this a little bit right at the beginning of everything that we talked about so far.
The main thing I saw in Act 2 was just the expansion of, like, you saw, like, more zip lines and things like that, and it seemed to indicate a stronger influence of the presence of Robotnik's forces, so it's like you're kind of penetrating deeper and deeper into occupied territory, so to speak.
Right. The Green Hill Zone's supposed to, in all of the Sonic games, they always have that as the first level to show you this is what nature looks like as Robotnik is taking it over. Like, you see the before.
Right.
And that's
it's kind of like Angel Island Act 1 from Sonic 3, where you have the level, you have the Act 1, and then, like, at the beginning of Act 2, there's the bombing and the transformation with the
and that's a really important contrast to make in Sonic, because even in the relatively natural Green Hill Zone, like, Sonic as a series, its visual design and audio design have always been very technologically inspired. The trees are made out of pentagons. The tree, not pentagons. I mean, like triangles, parallelograms. Everything's very angular. The music is
it's inspired by that early '90s collage approach.
Yeah, the music is zippy techno. The world already in its natural state feels half artificial. So, like, it's important to establish what actually is natural early on, because anyone going in there expecting, like, a lush, natural, round aesthetic design is going to be confused unless they get their expectations grounded first.
They basically just decided, we've got a console that, works in squares, so let's just make everything, like, in the world that it exists in be square. It's that kind of, like, surrealist / magical realist approach, which is more commonly accepted in Japanese pop culture. Like, a bird can look like a block, that's fine.
Which then ends up making the things that are round look even more magical.
Yeah.
Which would be loop-de-loops, rings.
Sonic
is a magical creature.
The spaces in Sonic games are always treading the line between physical and metaphorical. They're physical in that, yes, they're intended to, on one hand, be actual places within Sonic's universe, actual physical places where people theoretically live. But on the other, but more than that, they're supposed to be metaphorical, like, trials to move through. Like, look at it in any given Sonic game, like the casino level or whatever, especially in something like Sonic Heroes. Like, it's really just like a long disconnected series of floating platforms that are occasionally connected by pathways that only a creature like Sonic could pass through. Like, this can't be actual like literal architecture. This has to be on some level symbolic or metaphorical.
The way I always saw it is that we see the world through Sonic's eyes. So we see the way that he constructs the world, and the way that he constructs the world is that he can put together a view of the world that, like, I can race through that.
That is a really interesting
So maybe it's like the loop-de-loops are like, like, it's almost like when he moves at the speeds that he moves at, there's more things that have, like, he can move in ways that other people can't. So he can see, like, curvatures of space and time, to where you get something like a loop-de-loop. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Have you ever seen Sonic CD's intro FMV? Because
that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, that jives really well with what you're saying.
And then I'm also thinking of stuff like, FF7's, like, we were talking about this earlier with the mental breakdown sequence and the, being trapped in Cloud's head, seeing the big cloud, doing the thing with the head and all that. So there's lots of
narrator and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, especially because video games are so driven by things like engines and stuff like that, which limit, like, what kinds of interactions you can do. Like, just for example, you get the Cambrio engine that they used, where you can't climb a ladder. And just, there are plenty of examples like this in different kinds of video games, but it gives you, when you approach that critically, you kind of just have to acknowledge that that's how video games are made. And one of the things that creates is, like, you have to make the world a visual metaphor for how your character would see it in relation to the kinds of labor that they would do unto it. That's a lot.
I think what you're saying, if I could kind of spin this in a way, you're saying that in Green Hill Zone, what we've played through, any times that you see Sonic or any of the characters doing something that doesn't look natural, here's a place where it actually is. Like, they are an indigenous force moving through the S-curve tunnels in order to quickly get to Robotnik as fast as possible.
Right.
Whereas, when we get to later levels, where we get into the industrial spaces that aren't his, he becomes an invading force that is subverting the uses of the technology around him.
Which is why you see less of those natural, like, loop-de-loop areas, and instead Sonic just reacting to things that Eggman.
Right.
I mean, a hang glide thing is very, very antithetical. He hangs with his arms and his feet don't move. It's.
I guess it's antithetical to Sonic,
but this was a rib. This is clearly meant to piss off Sonic the Hedgehog.
Think of the other animals. They got to get through places too. They can't run everywhere.
No, but I think I always figured that those kind of things would be installed by Eggman.
So
that's what I'm saying.
I always saw the zip lines as being very natural.
We're working on that, analysis of how Sonic 3's level design works and how a lot of it is influenced by Eggman's presence. That's basically how I would read the presence of when you go from Act 1 to Act 2. That's what I was saying. When you go to Act 2, you get a lot of that stuff, and a lot of that stuff which kind of subverts Sonic's natural form of movement. Sonic jives with the natural world. His form of movement jives with the natural world, but when Eggman becomes involved, or when he's on a foreign place like Angel Island, the world doesn't jive with him.
Yeah,
right.
Notice how Green Hill Zone doesn't have that many big pools of water that Sonic can easily drown in. Notice how that's more prevalent in something like Chemical Plant Zone. So It does make sense that Eggman would construct that in a way to deliberately try and stop Sonic. Yeah, contain it.
Cool.
Yeah, cool indeed.
I like the idea of Sonic having spaces where he is comfortable and then adapting those ideas into spaces where they are meant to be destroying him, and he is subverting those that aggression and making it something that empowers him. It's the idea of being the indigenous person outside of, like, in spaces that have been invaded, that have been taken over by another force. And that's kind of the life that Sonic lives in. I hope we get to see that more. I'm excited to see that more in the later levels. Let's talk about the big Eggman in the room. Let's talk about the bosses.
The Act 1 boss I just had one primary, like, ideological problem with, which is that, like, you hit it, and then you can't hit it for a little while. But, like, it switches the thing that you could hit, which I guess if you're Tails, like, maybe you jump higher, and so you can actually reach that, and maybe that's one of the...
can.
Oh, okay.
You can just fly into his bottom.
Oh, okay. That actually kind of makes sense. But I found that boss kind of frustrating a little bit with Sonic, because literally it was just a waiting game. Because you just hit it and then wait, hit it, wait, hit it, wait. Once I figured it out. Now, the Act 2 boss, once I figured that guy out, Like, the way that they were doing it, I thought I was supposed to, like, wait until there was, like, an elevation and then use that to jump on him. I didn't realize that you're supposed to charge at his feet and get behind him. It's, like, designed to explicitly be beaten in the way that you would do an exploit for an old Sonic boss.
The Act 2 boss is still pretty bad at telegraphing. It was in Sonic CD, and it still is here. Like, there's no obvious
Oh, is this a port of a boss that existed
It's
in Sonic
very
CD?
similar to the Palm Tree Panic boss from Sonic CD.
Ah, okay.
So, like, it doesn't... There are no easy tells for, like, this is when you're safe to attack the boss, other than, you know, jumping on its head or getting behind it.
Right. One of the so we're gonna I guess we're gonna focus more on the second boss than the Act 1 boss, because the Act 1 boss is very simple. It's a simple boss.
Not a lot to say.
Not much to say about
Did
it.
any of us have, like, any real trouble with it, aside from what I said?
It's not that I had trouble with it. It was just it's a slow boss,
Yeah.
and it's kind of it just was literally like, all right,
It's the Act
there's
1...
a boss that will telegraph its weak points and the points where it can hurt you.
Right, it's the level 1 Act 1 boss.
Very clear.
Yeah.
I only had like mechanical issues because Tails Descending is a little slippery.
Right.
maybe
when Tails, I saw you hitting on this boss. Tails would hit the boss. It would just land on it, and it would do damage, and it would do damage, and then at a certain point, you'd be level with the boss, and then it would hit you, even though it was still weak to. It was still able to be damaged. It was just a confusing Sonic thing.
Yeah.
That I saw happen on your screen. That was like, that was weird. That's
Well,
really
you probably
weird.
just were out of the hitbox. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
You're out of the hitbox, and then you're in their hurt. You're in your own hurt box. It was
yeah.
just a weird overlap of stuff. For the Egg Walker thing, the Eggman boss, I don't know why it has legs. That's my question, because the legs don't hurt you.
Yeah.
Even though the feet are spiked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And you're supposed to be navigating that underbelly.
I figured that what would happen is that I would charge into the feet, and that the feet would be like the obvious weak point that I'd been missing, and that I would then charge through them and then jump into the body and get like a lot of fast damage. And I kind of did that, but I basically just charged behind him because the feet have no hurt box attached to them.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yes.
what you do is that you get behind him and then jump him, and then, you know, probably you're supposed to, like, then, like, follow from behind and get back out, or something like that. I don't
There's
know.
a lot of ways.
It's a really weird boss.
I just
There's
totally
like-
cheese the boss.
There's like 4 different ways to cheese the boss.
but we
And
don't-
all
but
of them,
but what's the
none of them are
legit strategy?
obvious.
What's the legit strategy for beating this boss? Like, what's
And here's the biggest kick in the pants, is that this is a timed boss fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make any
Is that
sense. Especially
eventually you get walked out into the edge, and I think the first time I fought it, I know the first time you fought it, and I'm pretty sure the first time you fought it,
we all got timed out.
we all got timed out by the boss because we would get far away from the boss, wait for an opening, and during this time he wouldn't give us an opening because he'd just keep throwing bombs.
I thought at first maybe you were supposed to be doing something with the bombs, but
That's what I thought too.
But if you get too close to him, he just throws out the arm, but you're under the arm, so you can't take advantage of it. So
Right.
you just kind of jump at him because you already know you're screwed.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of ways to do this boss,
Mm-hmm.
but none of them are the obvious way,
Yeah.
and all of the ways that we ended up doing this boss were kind of weird and different, and
They just involved war of attrition. Which
It was kind of funny.
is phrase
I just-
used earlier.
That's what I did.
a strange first big bad boss.
Now, granted,
that was hard.
It's
Genuinely
very
difficult.
It's very real to Sonic bosses, because the thing is that usually Sonic bosses do have an obvious way of beating them slowly. But what they also have is like, hey, here's a wacky exploit where you can just get behind him and jack him up a few times. With this boss, you have to do the wacky jack him up a few times exploit, but that's like the regular way to beat the boss.
Yeah, that's
Or at
wild.
least that's how everybody figures how to do. That's how a lot of people figure out how to beat Sonic.
Which maybe that's what
Do
they're
it the
trying to
wrong-
teach
Do it
us.
the wrong way first.
Maybe that's the goal of Sonic Mania, is just to be like, hey, screw it up. Just jack up Eggman. Do whatever you gotta do. This is your life. He's in your space. You get him out of here.
Just beat him up.
Bounce him out of here.
Do resource management.
Like, I mean, there's like that's a really interesting point because like even up until the final boss of the game, which I won't spoil, but like there is absolutely a way to cheese it once you understand like where the hitboxes lie and like where the damage boxes lie, and you're able to exploit it in clever ways. There are clever ways to exploit every single boss, and it always feels good when you find them because it still feels like you're discovering something.
Yeah, it's true.
This hitbox and everything reminds me that we should probably get someone to draw diagrams like on stream that happened that one time?
Right. A couple months ago, we streamed the Sonic games, and eventually we got so frustrated by some of the bosses that the people watching drew up diagrams, said, don't touch this part, touch this part.
This is saucy evil. Do not go here.
And here's the spicy hitbox, smack that. And we're like, oh.
Smack that spicy hitbox.
And we smacked
I
that
still have the
spicy hitbox.
screenshots on my computer.
We made it work. We made it work eventually. It just took some time. Took a little tender love and care. And so yeah, it was interesting to see like that's the design path they wanted to go with for the first Eggman boss in the Green Hill Zone. Was like, we're just gonna throw you into this spicy boss fight. And from what I understand, a lot of the other bosses coming up aren't gonna be like that.
They're still playing with a pretty small mechanic set, like, you know, just run, jump, spin dash. That's basically what Sonic is.
Yeah.
Like, at no point in the game are you required to learn how to use the drop dash or anything, or any of the new mechanics.
So one thing that made the second boss very difficult for me is that in the first boss it teaches Tails players that you can fly into enemies and sometimes it'll hurt them.
Yep.
If you were to try and fly into this boss, and the difference between a fly and a spin jump is very minor, but if you were to fly into it, it will hurt you.
That's so weird.
So you had to do the little thing to make sure that you're jumping, but not flying. If you accidentally start flying, you gotta fly away. You can't attack this turn.
Right. If you accidentally hit the A button twice in the air as Tails, it's like, all right, there's no attack for you here. You have to hit it in one jump.
Yep. You wasted your opportunity.
Dang. Huh.
Yeah.
Which sucks for a timed boss.
We did make you race. Is there any other final thoughts on Green Hill Zone? I think we've pretty much covered everything.
No, we went very in depth.
Other than that, I liked the level motifs where the second act featured all of the really scary stuff that Green Hill Zone should. So you started having the corkscrew spikes that come out of the ground. You had
the bad bridges.
Bad bridges that would drop.
the quote unquote bad bridges.
They would drop you into a pit of spikes.
Right, that one.
And Kiwi's like, what are you guys talking about?
God, I'm so glad that it's not in this guy.
Yeah, you don't
underwater areas.
You don't want to have to deal with the corkscrew spike bridge.
Piranha mechs.
I made it over it, but that's just because I had a lot of speed going over it.
I'm excited for the next level.
It's almost 2 o'clock. Like,
yes,
I promised my girlfriend we would still do some other stuff today. So
thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Call me back anytime. Like, I'm always up for more streaming or whatever.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're gonna talk more Sonic.
All right.
As we develop the series. This has been fun.